Right. So we'll start with the interactive part of the workshop now. And I'm going to start off with an introduction to HTML and CSS. If you want to, actually let me just do one more thing real quickly. So we're going to record this. Okay. So if you want to work on JavaScript in a web environment like you do for visualization, you need to know about HTML and CSS first, because they give the framework which you can then influence using JavaScript. And before we can actually get going, we ask you to download the course materials. Who has done that so far? Anyone who had any trouble? You all ready? Okay, cool. So then we'll start off. Yeah.
Please extract the archive, not just enter it, because Windows 7 allows you to just enter the archive and work with it as a folder. But that creates all kinds of problems, so you actually need to extract the archive.
Okay. Okay, cool. Already having some experience from yesterday. I like it. So we'll talk about HTML first. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. That means it's a markup language. And markup languages are a way to structure data. So think of it as a way to tell your browser what kind of data it's dealing with and roughly in which place it should go. So we'll jump right in and take a look at an HTML file. It's fairly simple. This is a fairly simple one. And how the markup works with HTML is through what we call tags. And you can see some of them here. They start with a pointy bracket opening, then some couple of letters or a word, and then they close again. And that's a tag. And we start off with what is called a doc type on the top. That just tells your browser it's HTML you're dealing with. And then in the actual HTML itself, you always have an opening tag, like the HTML up here, and then the corresponding closing tag, like you can see all the way on the bottom. And that just works by putting a / in front of the tag ID. So HTML always starts off with an HTML opening tag and ends with a closing tag. And then it has two major sections as well. You have the head, which starts again by opening by head in brackets, and then closes by slash head. So this is the head part, and then that's the body part. This is the non-optional part of the HTML. It starts with HTML, and closes with /HTML, and it has a head and a body part. In the head part, you get all sorts of additional information about this file. For example, you can put a title. That will be the title that's displayed on your little tab on top. You can link style sheets, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can add information about encoding, something that will make it easier for Google to find your page, for example. And then the actual content will be in the body part of the file. So you have a couple of different data types you can add into HTML, as I said before, to structure it. And those are determined by the tags. So you can have an image tag, which obviously, so IMG, that stands for image, which obviously is there to tell the browser this is an image file you're supposed to display. And in this case, you know, it's some image file you'll have in your folder. You can have a line break, and some of these, as these two are a bit special in that they don't necessarily need a closing tag. You can put it there, but all the information will be in the actual tag, in the opening tag itself. So the closing tag is unnecessary in those cases. And then down here we have sort of a special tag as well. We'll later use to actually work with JavaScript. This is a canvas tag, and what it does is basically, it's like a blank page of paper on your HTML. You can later draw on, for example, using JavaScript, which we'll do. And then there's one more important tag that's very important in modern HTML. It's the div tag, that stands for division, and it basically creates, you know, a section or a division which groups together other elements. And if you take a more abstract look at that, you can say that HTML is right on top, and everything in the file is inside this HTML tag, and you have two sub-parts of that part. It's the head and the body, and they can have an arbitrary number of sub-components themselves. So you have, the additional information in the head, the actual content in the body, and that can fan out further, and you can have one division which groups together some elements and has another subdivision, and those can also group elements together. And this is what we call a tree structure in computer science, as many of you might know. And because if you turn it on its head, it kind of looks like a tree, more like a bush actually, but you get the sense. It's a root, what we call the root on the bottom, and then it branches out. This tree in HTML is also sometimes referred to as the document object model, because it's basically the objects of the document, and how they relate. So if you ever hear about DOM manipulation in the sense of JavaScript and these kind of things, that basically just means we are manipulating this object tree, and we are changing things around and adding things or deleting things. So let's get right to it. We all asked you to download this zip folder that you hopefully have extracted already, and it should look like this. Right. Let me just change some things around so you can actually see what I'm seeing. And we're going to make some space as well. So basically, we ask you to download this folder here, right here. Can you see that well? I hope so. So go inside, you'll find 6 more folders from 1 to 6. And we're going to start off with number 1, obviously. This is the empty project. You'll see a number of files in here. Sorry. One of them is an image file, just standard image file. We'll later embed in our file. We have 2 .js files. That's where the JavaScript is going, and some of it we already gave for you, so we can move ahead a little bit faster. Then there's also a CSS file, which will house the style for our website, and I'll talk about it in a minute. And then there's the index.html file. That's where we're going to start off. So what we're going to do first thing, I'm going to show you what we're trying to do in the next 10 minutes or so. So this is what we're trying to do. It's just a very simple HTML page. We'll create a skeleton, a headline, play around a little bit with the styling, with the background color, and then Jessica will take over and you'll start actually drawing some circles on this canvas we'll add in the next couple of minutes. So what I want you to do, first of all, is if you open your browser and then open the HTML file, there are several ways to do it. A simple one is just by dragging it into the browser. That works in Chrome, and I'm pretty sure it works in Safari and Firefox as well, but we ask you to install Chrome anyway. What you can see now is like a very simple page. It's basically just an image. But we're going to play around a bit with that. So I'd like you to open the index.html file, and I increased the size a little much before. If you use a simple text editor, that's what it's going to look like. I'm actually going to use WebStorm because it's really cool, and it is a really nice presentation view, so you can actually see what I'm doing. So we'll go here. All right. Okay. So this is basically the folder you've seen. And I'm going to open the index.html file. And as you can see, we already gave you some things to start off with. It's basically almost the same I just showed you on the slides. It's a simple HTML file. It starts and ends with an HTML tag. It has an head and a body and some information already in there. It also has some JavaScript files imported down here, which we'll use later. So the first thing we can try and do is just play around with the title. Just add anything you like. I'm going to say JavaScript workshop, exclamation point. Save it, and then go back to your browser and just reload the site. And as you can see, this now says JavaScript workshop in the title of your tab up here. And then the next thing we can actually do is we'll just add some text, for example, a headline. Headlines have the tag, yeah.
Can you zoom in because it's really difficult to read?
Yeah, I can make it a bit bigger, but right. Sorry, what? I know that didn't make any difference. What I can do is I'll just swap that around. So, better now? So what we'll do is create a headline. In this case, open a new tag. This headline tag has the name h1. So we'll open the braces, h1, and then do the same thing again, but with a slash this time. And right. All we need to do is like go in between those tags and write a headline. So we'll call it my first JavaScript visualization. Save the file, go back to your browser, reload it, et voila, you have your first headline. That was pretty simple, right? Who made it this far? Everyone with me? Okay. Otherwise, you know, we have our great mentors around. So we're going to add some more text, this time in a p tag, which stands for paragraph text. And we'll just say, have a look at these cool circles. Now, one thing we'll have to do before moving on to the style sheets is this canvas element that we'll later use to draw on also needs to be given some dimensions. So we'll start off by going this time inside the beginning tag, so within the braces, and add two more attributes despite the ID. And that's going to be the height and then equal sign and quotes. And we're going to give it a height of 300 because we tried that out and that looks kind of nice. And also a width. So you just write width, equal sign, quotes, and make it 360. So that's all we have to deal with right now. If you save that, go back to your browser and reload it, you can see that now we have added some more text. We can't see, however, the canvas object. And that's because it's basically see-through. But we'll try to change that around in a second. If you take a look back here, it looks much nicer, even if it's just a little bit, because this, you know, all the content is there, but it doesn't look very nice yet. It's just stuck at the left, and not much is happening with it. So to change that, we need CSS. Did everyone get that so far? Should I show the code again for a second, anything like that? All right, cool. So CSS is the second part you need to work with if you want to create websites and use JavaScript and so on. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and basically what you need to know is it makes your websites look pretty. HTML is there for the content, to structure the content, to tell your browser it's this sort of data we're dealing with, and CSS will tell it where to put it and how it should look. So I'll give you just a quick example. I'm going back to my browser here, and I'm going to the website for this event, which looks, you know, it looks kind of all right. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete all the CSS on the website. And now it looks like this. Everything's still there, all the content is there, all the words, all the pictures, but it, you know, it doesn't look like anything anymore. So when I put the CSS back in, it looks nice again. So that's the difference that CSS makes in a website. So I'll tell, yeah. No, I just deleted the whole file or like cut everything and then pasted it back in. So you can do that within the Chrome developer tools. You can actually access the files, live if you want to. Sorry? No, I edited the actual file itself. I just, control everything and Control A and then Control X, and it's just gone. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you can, that's why it's called front end, and if you load a website, the browser will download it all and store it locally, and you can, fiddle around with it and change it around without actually changing what's on the server in that way. So let me tell you a little bit more about CSS. CSS files look a little bit different than HTML. They're not a tree structure. They don't have these tags with the curly braces, pointy braces. Instead, a CSS command, if you like, has 3 parts. You have a selector in front that tells the browser which part of the document are we talking about. Then you have an attribute, so what of that document or of that object we want to change, and then a value for that attribute. You can have a number of attributes for one selector or just one, or and these selectors are important, and there are 3 different kinds of selectors, and that's something that took me a while to actually get behind when I started using this stuff. There are element selectors, and those are just a bit of text, a couple of letters, and those are always the name of an HTML tag. There are ID selectors that start with a hashtag and then any word you want. And there are class selectors that start with a period and then again something you define yourself as a name. While again, these up here are always the name of an HTML tag. And how they work is as follows. So imagine you have a simple HTML website. You put in some text with the P elements here, so you have 2 paragraph text. There could be some code in between or not, doesn't really matter. Your browser will display that nicely for you. It'll know, it's text. This is what it looks like. But imagine you now want to change the color around, which is a very simple way of, making the appearance look a bit different. What you can do is now select using CSS all the P elements and change the color. In this case, it means the text color to red. So that will work. Now your browser knows through the CSS file, okay, please select all the P elements and color them red. But imagine now that you only want one of those to be red and not all of them. That doesn't work this way. So you need another approach, and that is through the ID of the element. So in this paragraph tag, you can add an attribute, ID, and give that some value you want to, and you can then access this element alone in CSS by going hashtag and then the ID you gave it before. So this will access only the element with this ID, which is pretty cool, I think. But now imagine you've added some more text. And this time I gave you the headline. This could also be a P or any other text element. And you want this one, so this one down here, to look exactly like this one. But because the ID is because it's an identifier by default, it's unique, you can't just reuse that one. So you would need to give it another ID, say ID equals header, and then you would need to copy all the code in here and just to have the same for this, which isn't very practical in any way. So that's where the third of the 3 selector types comes in. And it's probably the most important one if you deal with CSS and web design today. And what the class does is it gives you CSS you can add to as many elements as you want. Using the class attribute, you can now add a specific class. So in this case, the class with the name red text to multiple elements. And in your CSS, you can just define it once. And this is done by using the dot notation, so it's period, name of the class, all the stylings you want to give it, and then you can give this class to any element you want, and it'll be rendered by the browser. So let's try that out in our example. Let's go back to our folder here. Hope you can see that all right. And this time, we're going to work in the style.css file. So I'm going to try do it side by side again, and I hope you can read it, but I think I can actually make that a little bit bigger because okay. So this time, I'm opening the style.css file. And again, we already gave you some bits to play around with, so we can get ahead a little bit quicker. And so you can see all these different types of selectors up here. So you have an element selector with body, and for the headline, you have a class called center that just will make all the text be aligned to the center, so move in the middle. And we also have one ID selector down here for our canvas. So the first thing we'll try to do, because it's really nice and it makes a big difference, this is a simple thing, we'll change the background color of the body. And what this does is it will select the body element, which means this covers all the content, and change the background color. So you can type in background minus color, then there's a colon, then we'll do the value for it. I'm going to say light blue, because that goes nicely with the design of our website. And at the end of the line, put a semicolon. That will tell CSS that you begin a new line here. It sometimes works without it, but sometimes you might wonder why it doesn't work, and that the reason was that you forgot the semicolon at the end of the line. So save that, and again go back to your browser, reload the page, and we now have a blue background color. You can also play around with the size of our headline, for example. If you reload it, it's pretty big. I don't want it to be that big, but you can play around if you want to. One more thing I'd like to do here is I want this picture to be smaller because it's very big. It's just an icon and nothing I really need to do. And so we'll take a look in the index one more time. And what you can see here is that our picture already has a CSS class assigned to it called icon. But if you look into the style file, this doesn't exist. So we're going to create it really quickly. You go period, icon, curly braces, open, and then you can add any style you want. And this time I want to shrink it, so I'll give it the attribute max minus height. That will limit the size in the vertical size to a certain amount. I'm going to say 50 pixels and semicolon, and then don't forget to close it again, to close the brackets again. If you save that file and reload your page, your icon is now very small. Let me just take a look at what it's going to be looking like. So one more thing you notice immediately is that everything's aligned to the center, and it's not on ours yet. So as I said, there's this class center already here. So all we need to do is add it to all the elements. So I'm going back to the HTML file. And I could now add that to every single one of those elements, which would be annoying. Or I can just, because we already gave you a div element in here that will group all these together, I can just assign it to the group itself. So I can type class equals center and save it. And then if I reload the page, it all moves to the center. Who made it this far? Who's actually with me? That's most of you guys. All right, cool. If you need help, again, just raise your hand. One more thing we need to do to get there is we'll add some stylings to the canvas object. That's down here somewhere, because I want it to be visible so you can actually see it. We gave you this selector for the canvas as already, so we can just start typing. We'll give it a different background color as well. So go background minus color, colon. I'm going to give it white so you can see it nicely, and give it a semicolon at the end. I'm also going to give it a border to make the contrast more obvious, and that works by starting a new line, typing border, colon, and this time this takes multiple values. So the first thing it wants to know is what kind of border. We'll call it solid, because it also could be, just a number of dots or something. Then it wants the thickness of the lines. It's going to be 1 pixel, and we'll give it a color as well, black. Again, if you save that, reload, that works. And that works because, I'm going to go back to the index here, because we already assigned the ID myCanvas to the canvas element, and then we selected it in the style file using hashtag myCanvas, and then added some styles to it. So that's it from me so far. Did everyone manage to follow along nicely? That looks, you all not, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to hand over to Jessica now to get you started with JavaScript.